Well, this is when we got together. This is around the time I'm vague on the band thing. I think how the band sort of ended. I'm sort of in my late 20s. I'm sort of vague on all that stuff.
Well, probably because you were less interested in being part of a unit, and you wanted to. You wanted to
Right.
write and
Yeah.
record.
Yeah. I don't think I was. I think maybe a couple of relationships. I don't think I was as certainly as disciplined as I am now about how I do things. Sort of a bit wanderlust in my thought, but at that time, I definitely had my studio going in my mom's basement, and I was sort of developing that, enjoying sort of I had a small couple of drum machines and an organ and stuff like that, but learning how to do vocals, harmony vocals, sort of the whole intrinsics. I had a Tascam 4-track. So learning about ping-ponging stuff. So ping-ponging is generally on my Tascam. I had 4 tracks to record a different instrument I wanted to do. And I would record something on 1 and something on 2 and something on 3, and then I would mix those 3 onto my 4th track. And yeah, sort of enjoying that. But becoming frustrated by the technical limitations that I had in my own head as to being an engineer and getting good quality sound, and working essentially with a cassette deck and the noise reduction, the Dolby noise reductions, which seemed to suck the life out of anything I would ever record. I ended up just doing tons of demos on my 4-track. I loved to make up songs, and so for those few last years, I think of my 20s, playing tons of hockey. Definitely thinking about now's the time to go and make my own album. And I think some of my close friends were saying, like, when are you going to go do something? I would play them stuff on my 4-track. Now, stuff on my 4-track was very much wanting to be a Sgt. Pepper. I was always putting sound effects on my 4-track stuff. I had a little Casio keyboard that I was writing stuff. I was quite happy to do that. But I was having close friends that were saying, you should go and me for myself wanting to record something in a more proper studio, something that I could listen to happily without. Because at the time I was very sort of stuck. I thought also in the loop of only being able to play my stuff to myself because of the problems with there was too much noise on my Tascam. I wouldn't use noise reduction, as I told you, because it would suck the life out of stuff. And just wanting to go and I had tons of songs to do. And so I went to see my friend JP, who was working in a drum store on Bank Street, or was it Bank? No, it was Gladstone. Yeah.
Was it called Songbird?
Songbird Music. And JP at the time was working in a music store, as he should. It seemed a logical place for JP. Lived upstairs. That's actually where we recorded stuff for Cher Shea. We did a couple other songs up there we recorded.
That was a famous apartment.
Yeah.
Known by many, recorded by many.
JP did other bands up there, and JP had some massive parties up there, like just massive parties. It was quite the time. So it was JP. So I went to JP at one point, and I said, you got to give me some names of people that might be interested in me singing and doing some recording. I want to do some recording in a proper studio. So I remember he gave me your name. I don't know how you had seen, I met JP previous to that, but he gave me your name and a fellow named John Dewar's name.
John and I worked together for a long time, and we would always buy stuff from Songbird. We'd be buying guitars, buying little delay units, rack unit stuff. And we were just amassing our little tiny project studio. And
right.
So
yeah.
JP through that.
And you guys were doing a lot of Cher Shea stuff as well.
That's pretty well how we got started, because I had bought a I guess a Tascam 244, the four-track cassette. All the tracks went one way. That's when John and I started doing it together and getting our stuff.
And you did it where? At Lenore Place, where you lived? Where was you, or did you do it at John's place?
The first place I had my 244 was at 151.5 Bank Street, which is very early on. And then I moved in with John to Waverly.
Okay.
Do you remember Waverly Street, that place at all? The house?
Near the Pretoria Bridge?
Knee deep into it here, people are going, move on.
No, was that near Pretoria Bridge?
Yes. Well, no, that was Hawthorne.
Okay,
there.
okay.
That eventually is where we ended up
Right.
as our first kind of real studio was Hawthorne. Because I lived on Gladstone for a little while and we had a studio in the back there. But then we moved it to 10 Hawthorne, I believe it was. And that's where it was in John's basement with Elizabeth living there.
Right. So I think it was 91. Now I'm thinking, so Cherche for when I did it, and I'm looking at the CD thing, was 89. And I remember showing up at your place at some point where you guys were in the middle of doing Cherche stuff. So I don't think it was the years that that we did our Cherche thing with JB. So I'm thinking maybe 90, 91 that I
Yeah, it was
showed up.
just after that because you had brought me, as I mentioned in an earlier episode, a PCM VHS tape with a song of yours called Wild World, and I was on St. Andrew Street at that point. So JP had turned you to me to transfer your tape.
Right, okay, yeah.
Because I had the PCM video deck.
Right, okay, so purely maybe out of that logic, as to me, I maybe quite slightly reticent to meet new people. So at some point I said Steve would be the guy that I would go see, only because I guess I had met you previously
Yeah, we
at
clicked
time.
pretty well. You and I pretty well planned because I was going to build a studio on Lenore where I was moving to.
Right.
And you said, fantastic, because I want to use a studio and my income for you will help you build the studio. And that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, so I knew, I didn't know what it would, I knew I wanted something more than a 4-track Tascam. I knew you guys had an 8-track. Was it half-inch?
Tascam 38, half-inch, 8-track deck.
Past that, I didn't really know what you had, but I finally made the move. I put a version of some song I had done onto a cassette, and I remember meeting you in the kitchen at Lenore Place. I remember it was my first real conversation, and I remember saying I have this 4-track this cassette of this song, just to give you an idea of something I had done. And I also remember I was sort of specific on how you were supposed to listen to it, because I wanted you to listen to it the same way that I hear it in my head, because nothing really translated over real speakers to me, and this is one of the reasons why I think I brought it to you. So yeah, I sort of introduced myself in my sort of anal way, but I think you did listen to it the way that I was asking.
Oh, most definitely. I remember for a number of years, maybe you were more serious back then, but it was like, no, you cannot listen to it that way. Like, no, I'm not going to let you. So that's fine. Whatever way makes you comfortable, mate. We've always been that way. Whatever makes you comfortable.
Yeah, well, I think I was very cognizant at the start of at least being on somebody that would listen to something that I had done, could hear it the same way that I listened to it.
Must have been a big step, because at that point, it was all internal. Am I good? Am I bad? Is this stupid? You know?
Yeah, well, I had washes being in a band and stuff like that. You keep doing what you're doing. But yeah, there was a question of it was important that I had a good impression with you because I knew you were a studio guy, and I didn't want to you to go, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. So it was important to me on the first impression that you at least said. And I don't know why I picked Games. This song specifically, which you have a copy of and stuff like that. I have no reason why. There were tons of other stuff sitting there. But yeah, so I had no concept of really what you had downstairs. I had no idea of the technology that was available to me. I had some inkling that stuff was coming around the corner, technology-wise. Just the fact that I had a 4-track cassette deck was a pretty big thing with me. So
I think you were pretty jolted too, because it was now reel to reel. It was more in essence of what you were imagining was a real like experimental studio. We always said we loved the idea of having a Frankenstein lab where anything goes.
Yeah, and I mean the biggest sort of part of your studio was at that time for all. So you had your studio downstairs in your basement. You had a sound booth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So walking downstairs for the first time, I saw a lot of things I had never seen before. It was also the biggest sort of thing at that time was sort of you yourself. How comfortable would I feel about you coming in? Because I didn't really know what you did musically. You seemed like a good enough guy to me, just a good enough pal. But I was still unsure about how just sort of letting you in on my insanity, like. You know, like, am I going to freak them out or stuff like that? Like, am I just too fucking out the door? Because I had all these songs, and I remember coming down and seeing you and seeing your studio, and I think I remember going home that day, and I think I wrote a whole pile more songs that week or stuff like that, because I just thought, maybe my songs aren't good enough. Maybe I have to go write some more stuff. I mean, I've been writing songs.
It's probably like, it's like your dad taking you to Disneyland. Like you're going, wow, somebody else is also going to take over some of this responsibility, so I can open up a little. Like I would hope.
I hope this is going to be good. I just remember going home and just wanting to even write better songs and stuff like that. Even though I had piles and piles of stuff. They say the first album that you do is probably the easiest because you've got all the songs that you've done.
Elvis Costello said I had 18 years to get ready for it.
So I would say. So the biggest thing for me coming into your studio was, so this was 92. 92? 90,
I would think it might be a little, I was just thinking with this, I bet you that, being 2019, next year might be like 30-year anniversary, because 89 was Cherche. It was like the year after you wanted to get going. So I'm thinking we're coming up to 30 years pretty soon.
It took us a couple years to do, so I was about 30, so it all makes sense. It was probably about 91. Mm-hmm. So the biggest takeaway that I have about coming into your studio, just purely as a musician, wasn't only your 8-track, but was all this new technology. So I've always wanted to orchestrate my albums. I've always said that if I was to go out and play live, the best band for me would be an orchestra, because I could, because all the material I write, I could use a bit from each part of the orchestra. And it seems the most logical to me.
While keeping the core of the rock ensemble.
You basically have a rock ensemble surrounded by like
and I think we know where that all sort of stems from all of our origins. It's like the creation story of modern music.
Absolutely. And so I had a bit of that on my Casio, but I really didn't know how to make those things work. So I think within a few days, or the few times that we had got together at the start, it became very evident to me of this new technology. So I think first of this monitor that you had sitting beside the 8-track. You had this beautiful mixing board and you had this monitor. Of course, you had some few instruments. So this monitor turns out to be, what was the computer you had?
It was an Atari 1040 running MasterTrax Pro.
So this MasterTrax Pro was could run this box that you had on a rack. And this box, I think you ended up with a couple boxes.
I'm embarrassed to say it was a Yamaha TX81Z.
Right, I turned the word box.
8-note or 12-note polyphony, like it was next to nothing, but it had those fake reed instruments.
Well, at the time, even though you can say it now, that it was a small little sort of sound module, stuff like that.
FM synthesis.
At the time, it was everything and anything that I could have even ever imagined. Because if you scroll through, so it basically produced sounds that you could trigger off a keyboard. And if you scrolled through the names of the things, they would have different types of string sections and different types of harpsichords and clavinets.
Because that's all over that.
And it was all on a beautiful LED display that I've never seen before. And and you started to explain to me that you can record your piano and the notes show up on the screen, which is something I've never
Sequencing.
gobsmacked. There was that thing, which I think just about put me in a paralysis.
We do have to tell people that back then, without sequencing, without the computer, you pretty well had to play your cheesy little keyboard parts for the whole song.
Yeah.
Right? For the whole song, not making mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because it was Steve and I in the studio with an 8-track, and I wanted to make a big fucking album. And by big, I mean a big orchestrated album. Like that was an absolute that I wanted to do. So you had this MIDI thing with the sound module. Was there just one, or there was a couple sound modules?
Yeah, there was a couple. Well, we had a Yamaha DX100, which in itself had a number of instruments. It was MIDI controlled, so we could add a few different tracks. It just came down to the polyphonic nature of the instrument, right?
Right.
And typically back then, each one was about 8 notes. But knowing that we said in the orchestra, your clarinet's going to play one note at a time, so there's one track, right? MIDI track, and so you had to carefully build up your instruments, knowing how many notes you're taking away from each instrument. It was tough.
Yeah, so it was something very exciting to me. Incredibly, I was almost in paralysis thinking about the potential, about what I could now do in the studio. But there was also something underneath that monitor that I remember. It was this keyboard that you had, and you had these floppy disks that were stuck into the back.
That would be the Roland A20 sampler keyboard.
So these were at a time where rap was coming in vogue and stuff like that, and the kids were into those 16-bit and 8-bit samples, sample drum sections and stuff like that. I'm
sure I'll dredge up some photos of the cards and the keyboard.
And I remember you had some sounds logged in there, and again, paralysis, I almost passed out. I remember you playing some string stuff, and you triggered it off the MIDI, and this was sampled stuff. And I was gobsmacked, and I think you once played a sample drum loop, but you triggered it off a whole pile of MIDI notes that we had written. I remember this early on, and it stuttered, and it gave all the stuttering stuff out. And this was like another seismic moment. I remember just thinking, oh my God, he's actually manipulating sound files. And I've always remembered, even when I was working at a grocery store, that if I could really get into the small parts of music, if I could move things around like that, I said that would just make me so happy. And I at that moment, so there was all this technology sitting in front of us. It was just so exciting. It was such an exciting time. I had a whole pile of songs that I was thinking of doing, and I think it was just like one of the biggest joy moments of my life, thinking about, especially when you're as an artist, when you think about the potential of something, and you have some songs, and you think you could be going there, and you think you could be going there with the song. It is a very exciting time to be alive and to be doing it.
Well, you know what? You're probably going to hear it now. What I would love is if we had the original version of games that you had on your Casio, and then...
Right. Don't you? You don't have that version? Didn't you play it?
The original version?
Yeah.
Maybe I do.
Yeah.
Should we go listen to it right now?
Maybe we should.
Okay, so this is how I first was introduced to Byron's music. there it is.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Climbing the charts.
Keep that
in
file open.
1990.
We got to go through that some more. That it's got an Emily. Oh my God, a working Emily. Oh, that's gonna. Oh my God. Okay. Well, anyways.
So-
next time.
So basically, that's come into frame again. Oh, you're okay there. That was my introduction after Wild World. This was the first song that Byron was going to do, and this is usually the reaction I would get after playing one of his songs, and I didn't know whether to take him seriously. I think he was worried that he was working in a vacuum, didn't know how other people would take it. So he would lose himself in the joy of presenting his music, and I wouldn't know, is this fucking guy serious or what is going on here? But seeing the genius in the song, because it wasn't a rock song.
Is that what you get from the artist who's just in hysterics over this?
I didn't know how to take it. But you can hear that it's not two guitars, bass, and drums pounding away as the guy's going, baby, which was the
That sounds good.
and interesting thing that I took away from these
Wait,
songs.
can you do that again?
No. So we're gonna go and move ahead now, and let's listen to what it became.
I don't wanna play your games. They can drive me so insane. Do you think that I'm amused? The demons in my head. I don't wanna be in love, just love. So this is what you want me to be. This is what you see in me. Do you take me for a fool? Don't ask me how I feel, 'cause I don't know what you want me to say. After all is said and done, after you've lost what you've won, I'm getting so confused. Oh yeah, everything must die. I don't wanna be alone, just love. I just wanna be.
Motion is ready. I'll go slowly. I'm not going to hurt you. I'll go gently. I'll go slowly. I'm not going to hurt you. I'll go gently. My solution is ready.
Самое діє, вони твої вас просто вигнали. make minden nördligen med Silly Simon Slick Sleeping Tick Solid and Go Tick Yavrin Yol Yak Yon Yolanda your girl is yelling and kiss back Peter Snappy Papi now Papa in the pail in jail.
Okay, so right now you just heard Games, the album version
Yeah.
and the pre-production version. So what we're going to do now is just discuss a little bit about because it's a great sample of all things Byronic, that song, and so we're just going to unpack that, deconstruct it a little, and then move on to the rest of the album. Sound good?
Sound good?